Okay, I'm going to now take a look at factoring trinomials. But before I actually factor trinomials, we have to take a look at multiplying two binomials, or if you recall, foiling. So let's review foiling. So for example, let's say here I have two binomials. X plus 2 is a binomial. It has two terms, and then I'll multiply that by x plus 8. So if you recall, the way we multiply two binomials is we use the FOIL method. FOIL is an acronym for the way you multiply binomials. F standing for first, so we multiply the first terms. X times x, that gives me x squared. Then the outside terms. So that is x times 8, which gives me 8x. Then the inside terms. So that will give me positive 2 times x is plus 2x. And then finally the last terms. So that will be 2 times 8. That will give me 16. So again, FOIL. F-O-I-L. Okay, and so we combine our like terms, and we get x squared plus 10x plus 16. So when we factor trinomials, we always have to keep in the back of our mind the method or the procedure of foiling two binomials. Because after all, when we factor trinomials, we'll generally get the product of two binomials. Okay, so let's take a look at some examples here. So let me erase the board, and then we'll get into factoring trinomials. So the first example that I have is, let's say here I have a trinomial, x squared plus 5x plus 6. And I want to factor that as a product of two binomials. So what do? Well, first, you start with the c term, and you find all the factors of the c term. So 1 and 6, and 2 and 3. So we want to find factors of the c term that gives us the middle term, or 5. Okay, notice here, though, that the c term is positive. There's two ways in which you can get a positive when you multiply two numbers. One way is a positive times a positive, which equals a positive. The other way is a negative times a negative, which equals a positive. So we're going to have to multiply two numbers and get a positive 6. Which case is it? Is it positive times positive or negative times negative? Well, it's positive times a positive, and how do I know that? Because the middle term there, the b term, is positive. Okay, so factors of 6 that multiply that when added gives you 5 are 2 and 3. Okay, so when I go to factor my trinomial, the x squared, this x times x, well, that gives me the x squared, and then I have a positive 2 and then a positive 3. Okay, now we can complete foiling and check our work. X times x is x squared. So outside, x times 3 is 3x. Inside, 2 times x is 2x. And then last terms, 2 times 3 is 6. So that gives me x squared plus 5x plus 6. Okay, and that's what we started with. So we found the factors of x squared plus 5x plus 6, which are x plus 2 and x plus 3. Alright, let's look at some more examples here. Let me clear the board. So for the next example, we have x squared minus 3x minus 28. So here my c term is a negative 28. So I need to find factors of negative 28. Now, the only factors of negative 28, well, one is going to have to be positive and one will have to be negative, because a positive times a negative will give you a negative. So here, let's find factors of negative 28. Well, I'll start negative 1 and 28, or 1 and negative 28. And we want to find factors of negative 28 that, when added together, gives us a negative 3. So to continue, I have 2 and negative 14 and negative 2 and 14. That doesn't add to negative 3. Well, let's see it. 3 is not a factor of 28, but 4 is. So negative 4 and 7 and negative 7 and 4. Well, negative 7 and 4 gives me a negative 3. Okay, so when I go to factor x squared minus 3x minus 28, I'll factor it as a product of two binomials. Here's my x, and there's my x. That gives me x squared. That's that term there. And then I have a negative 7 and a positive 4. So I'll just check. X times x is x squared. Outside terms x times 4 is 4x. The inside terms negative 7 times x is negative 7x. And then negative 4 times a positive, or negative 7 times a positive 4 is equal to negative 28. Combine your like terms and you get x squared minus 3x minus 28. And that checks out to what we started with. Okay, you should always check your work when you factor. I once had a student, she'd always checked her work after she factored. I would always see it on her paper. And you know, she never got one problem wrong because she checked her work. Okay, another example here. Let's say here I have x squared minus 9x plus 20. And let me just clear up that x. Alright, so again, we start with finding factors of positive 20. Now again, if you recall, I said the only way that you can get a positive when you multiply is a positive times a positive, which equals a positive, or a negative times a negative, which equals a positive. In this case, it has to be negative times a negative. And how do I know that? Well, because I have a negative there. Okay, so I have to find factors of 20 that add up to negative 9. So I'll start with my table. And remember, both factors have to be negative. So I have a negative 1, negative 20. Well, that doesn't add to negative 9. I can have a negative 2 and a negative 10. That doesn't add to negative 9. Let's see here. 3 doesn't go into 20, but 4 does. A negative 4 and a negative 5. Well, that adds up to negative 9. So my factors. So when I factor x squared minus 9x plus 20, again, I'll write the product of two binomials. X and x, that gives me my x squared. And then I have a negative 4 and a negative 5. Right? So there, x squared minus 9x plus 20 factored is x minus 4 times x minus 5. And again, always check your work. X times a negative 5 gives me minus 5x. 4 times, or negative 4 times x gives me negative 4x. And then negative 4 times negative 5 gives me positive 20. So x squared minus 9x plus 20. It checks out. Now, the last problem that I'll take a look at. Okay, it actually won't be a trinomial, it will be a binomial, but we factor it as if it was a trinomial. And so problems like this, x squared minus 16. So notice we have a binomial, or two terms. Okay, actually we do have a trinomial, it's just that the value of b is equal to 0. So 0 times x is just 0. So we're just left with x squared minus 16. Well, but factoring this is no different than factoring other trinomials. again, I'll start with negative 16. Okay? So we need to find negative 16, factors of negative 16 that add up to 0. Okay? So, well, the only possibility is that I have a positive 4 and a negative 4. Okay? So 4 times negative 4 gives me negative 16, but 4 plus negative 4 gives me 0. And that's what I want. I want 0. Okay, so x squared minus 16 just factors into the product of two binomials. X and then x. So x times x is x squared. And then I have a positive 4 and a negative 4. Okay, so x times a negative 4 gives me minus 4x. And then 4 times x gives me a positive 4x. And then positive 4 times negative 4 gives me negative 16. See, what happens is the middle terms, they drop out. They become 0. So I'm left with x squared minus 16. And that's what I started with. So that's an overview of factoring trinomials. With that, you can go ahead and do problems 3 through 9, as well as 14 and 15. So as you do those problems, review the video, and you should not have a problem in being able to do this.